Слава Україні! Слава нації! Україна! 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 Героям України тричі! You know, my friends, there's been many times that me personally, I've spoke with some people in Speaker's Corner who don't understand the meaning of freedom of speech. They've asked me in a very mocking manner that if the free people of the West vote to not have freedom anymore, to not have freedom of speech anymore, if they vote to have authoritarian regimes in the future, should that be okay? To which I answered, no, that should not be okay. To which they answered laughingly, well, that's what freedom of speech is. You can simply vote yourself away from freedom of speech. Which, my friends, is a very big misunderstanding of the topic of freedom of speech. There are some limits to the ability of people to speak and to act. And that is what truly forms our ability to be free. There need to be some limits to that, so that we do not allow those who want to destroy freedom of speech to take over. Because these people will use every dirty trick in the book to get away with any crime that they can conceive. We must act whilst we have the power to act. When we lose that power, like the Russian people have lost it, and still don't seem particularly interested in recovering it, if we lose that ability, we will no longer be able to recover it until there is the spilling of blood. And that is something that should be avoided to the best of our ability. Nobody wants to die, and very few people want to kill. And those who do are usually psychopaths. And that is why, my friends, we should avoid allowing the Russian terrorist regime to amass more power, allowing the Russian terrorist regime to threaten our own safety and the free world directly. We need to stop them now whilst they're in Ukraine. As we mentioned before, the Suwalki Gap is the likeliest point that the Russians might attack in NATO in the future. The Russians will most likely lose, but Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania and Poland will suffer greatly. And that is exactly why these countries support Ukraine so much. They see what's going on in Ukraine. They see the ruthlessness and the genocidal tendencies of the Russian terrorist regime when they are allowed to act as they please. They see it and they do not want to allow that to spread to their countries. But alas, it would seem like a mere few hundred kilometers are enough for some countries to feel safe in their shells and to forget what the Soviet Union had done to them in the past. Countries like Hungary, for example, that have still not shown opposition to the Russophile supporter of Putin, Viktor Orban. The Hungarian people have suffered in the past and have resisted against the Soviet occupation. But they need to remember that once again, that siding with Russia is siding with a new Soviet Union, siding with new genocides, new exterminations. That is what everybody needs to understand. Because if we don't, well, my friends, then we are bound to repeat the same mistakes committed in the past. And what's the point of having history if we are bound to repeat it again and again and again? And it's funny, because one of the countries that has the most revisionist history on the planet is Russia. Russia's claimed that Ukraine has no history, that Ukraine was an invention by Stalin. Although the Kievan Rus, as the name implies, had its capital in Kiev. Ukraine was the heartland of the predecessor, of the progenitor country of Ukraine, Belarus, and later on Russia. But they have forgotten about that. They have forgotten about the fact that when Kiev was one of the most important cities in medieval Europe, Moscow was a mere swamp or a village where almost nobody went and almost nobody knew about its existence in the first place. But of course, don't allow something so petty as the truth get in the way of the Russians and their desires for what truly happened in the past, their vision for what happened there. Now, my friends, we can't change the past. It's impossible. There's no time machine. And even if there was, there would be all kinds of paradoxes at hand. But we can change the future. And that is exactly what we should all do. We should all try our best to understand what's going on in the world. Because this world is becoming more global, more united, less local, less separated. We need to prepare for that. The future could be very bright indeed. A future with almost no war, almost no destruction, almost no killings. I say almost, because a complete reduction of such things unfortunately seems impossible, considering the nature of mankind. But my friends, humanity can still have a great future. But we have to move towards that future together. We cannot continue to live in our own shells, expecting the rest of the world to change in our favor. We need to be able to influence the rest of the world. We need to be able to cooperate with the rest of the world, to be able to come to better conclusions, to exchange ideas, to exchange cultures. However, Russia stands against that. Russia stands for the annihilation of any kind of opinion or culture or idea that opposes their way, the genocidal way, the authoritarian way of the Soviet Union. Because that is what they truly want to return to. Going back to the past and wallowing in their own power, bathing themselves in the blood of millions of innocents like they've done many times in the past, to dye those red flags that they were sporting before with the blood of their victims. That must never be allowed to happen. We have to understand what's going on, my friends. If we allow ourselves to be separated from politics, if we allow ourselves to be separated from world history and current events, we are mere sheep, waiting to be slaughtered by those who are more understanding, who know what's going on, and who use that in their favor. We cannot allow terrorist regimes like Russia, Iran, and South Korea, North Korea, excuse me. Big mistake, actually, big mistake. Never put that online, okay. North Korea. I apologize to our South Korean friends everywhere around the world. Sometimes happens, my friends. By the way, if anybody would like to speak today, feel welcome. Feel welcome to do so. We're always welcoming people to give their own words. And if you make a little mistake, that's no problem at all. You can just apologize and correct yourself. The North Korean terrorist regime. South Korea is our friend. South Korea is one of our greatest beneficiaries. And it's truly funny, speaking of South Korea, let me give them some props, by the way, to compensate for the mistake. The South Koreans have been one of our main providers of shells. And the North Koreans have been the main provider of shells for the Russians. Which is a funny situation nowadays, because both these countries are on the opposite side of the world. And they are the biggest providers. Funny, truly. The West is finally starting to wake up, but very, very slowly. It's asking for 5 more minutes after the alarm has already sounded. They're changing the alarm 15 minutes to the future, to just sleep for a little bit longer. But we must not continue slumbering, or we will be sleeping forever, my friends. The eternal sleep that Russia will provide to everybody who opposes them and yet does not have enough conviction to stand on their way fully and to stop them from getting where they want to get, from killing whom they want to kill. We must understand this. Our friends from South Korea and Japan know this. That is why they are preparing. They're preparing for a possible confrontation with the Russian terrorist regime on their own front. The Russians have illegally annexed the Kuril Islands from the Japanese after they had already capitulated in World War II. It shouldn't even be explained that that is not allowed. When somebody capitulates, when somebody accepts their defeat and their conditions of defeat, you cannot continue to take away from them more and more and more. It's just not done. But for some reason, we have allowed the Russians to do so. We have allowed the Russians to keep Karelia and not give it back to the Finnish people as they should have. Although they had catastrophic losses in the Winter War, and the Finns were resisting them heroically, the Russians still managed to keep it, because they do not care about the cost. All they care about is that in the end, they get what they want. That is what we must understand. The Russian people are meat for the Russian government. They're nothing. They're slaves. Lower still than slaves. They don't consider them to be human. They will throw them again and again and again in meat waves until they finally get what they want. We can't expect that simply because they have more losses than the Ukrainians, they will give up. They will not. We have to finally show them that there is zero possibility for their victory. We have to tell the whole world that we will stand with Ukraine for as long as it takes for a Ukrainian victory. Not for Ukraine to survive, not for Ukraine to make concessions to Russia, but for Ukraine to win. Ukraine is the country that has given up the most to achieve world peace. In the Budapest Memorandum, the Ukrainians gave up the third biggest nuclear arsenal in the world, in the biggest nuclear demilitarization in human history. Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you, my friends. Thank you. Sure, thank you very much. You can always join us. Everybody who wants to join us is always welcome to join us. We're very happy to see new faces among us. We're always very welcoming. Our community includes people from all over the world. You know, we can see it by our flags. There's some lovely Lithuanian flags here. There's some Portuguese flags. I believe our friend over here has a badge with a Portuguese sign. We have some of our friends from Belarus, of course. A lot of our British friends are here. Some of our greatest supporters. And we are very grateful to every single one of them. But we must remind everybody that the war is not over. Battle continues. The war continues. And it will only end when the Russian terrorist regime is stopped. Stop Russia! Stop the war!
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 Help Ukraine! Protect peace!
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 Free Azov-style defenders!
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 As I've said before, my friends, we're always very happy to allow the people who support us to speak. And I'm happy to present our friend Garrett here to give us some of his own opinions.
Good afternoon, Slava Ukraini. Just a few words, not as good as Pavlo's, but let me just start by once again pointing to the 1, 2, 3 flags of Ukraine on the government buildings to remind us how important Ukraine is to the UK. I don't know if other flags are still flying in other European countries, but as a British person, I'm always proud to see that those flags continue to fly, and I'm sure they will fly. All I can do is bring a few news items to people's attention. Please let us look forward to the 24th of February, Saturday the 24th of February. Now I think the publications will go out shortly, but just to give you a heads up in the future, that I have every reason to believe that there will definitely be a march on the 24th of February. Starting at Marble Arch, I believe, 3 o'clock. We gather at 2:30 and we will march to Trafalgar Square. So, you know, from here on into the 24th, let us spread the word. Let us do everything we can to get as many people out as possible for this march, because there's one way it's going to represent the case for Ukraine to the British people and other people. It will be to have a really good march on the 24th. So let's make every effort that everybody who possibly can does join this march on the 24th of February. It's amazing to look back to 24th of February a year ago. In one way it's sad, and I'm not sure it happened again, but let's not forget that 1 year ago, I believe at 11 o'clock in the morning, the UK went silent for a minute in recognition of Ukraine. It just shows you how things can move on from a year, and now we have to worry that Ukraine, you know, remains in the forefront in Britain. One thing that does reassure me, I still see nothing on the streets of Britain which suggests that the general British public are losing interest in Ukraine, or against Ukraine. We see a bit more of that from the USA. Don't know whether that's propaganda, but I remain sure that Ukraine remains strong in the heart of Britain. One other thing that I've been doing recently, people who are able to access BBC iPlayer at their homes, I think BBC are definitely rerunning the programmes of Putin versus the West, and I've been watching those again myself and find them very interesting to re-educate myself and remind myself of exactly what took place, not only after 2022 but from 2014, well before 2014, and some quite eye-opening moments. I find it very interesting to see again the story of Yanukovych going to the treaty signing process, I think in one of the West European countries, and then turning up and not signing the treaty for Ukraine to join the European Union or the agreement. And of course, I believe that's what started the Maidan protests, or when they really erupted. Is that right? It is amazing that Yanukovych was called to Moscow and was lent on by Moscow, and then was prepared to go to this conference and then said, I'm not signing. So it's such an eye-opener again to remember that. And of course, who could forget, and it shows on these BBC programmes again, very well done, the actual Maidan protests, the innocent protesters who were just standing up for their rights and were actually killed for just standing up for their rights to freedom. So again, can I recommend people, if they have access to BBC and BBC iPlayer, to see if they can search out these programmes again and to watch them and remember, because I found them very good indeed. I think those are my two main news items. Hope they're of interest to people. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gareth. Thank you very much. One of our most regular supporters, my friends. People should be more like Gareth and should understand, have the understanding of this situation as he does. He very correctly mentioned the situation of Yanukovych and the way that this whole conflict started. And we will get into that. But before that, we will have a short musical break.